What we're looking at here is about $4,200. Now my car has some serious problems going on. Engine galley gasket is blown, and I think I may have a broken engine mount. And they're gonna want a little over $4,000 to fix that job, but I think they're ripping me off. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this repair myself. This is a very extensive repair. If your engine is idling rough at a stoplight when you have the car in drive, if your car is cutting out on you, then you have what's called a blown timing chain galley gasket. Now this video is going to show the process of me battling through this car's problems. This is going to be the most extensive repair job I have ever done on a car, and you guys are going to either see me die or you're going to see me fly, because it's the only two options. If I can't fix this car, I'm basically in deep trouble. But if I do, I get to pick this stack of cash up off the table and put it in my pocket and claim it as my own. The repair itself is only going to cost about $400 worth of tools and stuff I'm going to have to buy. But let me show you what we got. What we are looking at here is the VQ37 engine. I think it's HPR or something like that, I'm not sure. But this is a 2008 Infiniti G37 coupe. And I noticed it was hesitating a while back and acting strange, and it went into limp mode on me. And I did some research and I checked the codes. There was no engine light on when I checked the codes, and the codes come up to P0024 or 21 and P0054. The P0054 is a low pressure oil code, and they advise you to check your oil pressure on your engine when you get this code, not to go changing out these sensors. These are the camshaft position sensors, I believe. And basically what happened when I checked my oil pressure was I had 2 PSIs at idle, which is drastic. You're supposed to have at least 14 PSIs. So we are about to embark on a tremendous mission here. These are all the parts that I've purchased for this job. These are the infamous timing chain galley gaskets. I got these off Amazon. These are supposed to be made out of a new stuff, a reinforced gasket. Some people say it has a metal core even, but I don't know if I believe that. I also purchased a water pump. I've got a crankshaft seal, a thermostat gasket, a thermostat, some Loctite for the screws, and these are sensors. 2 of them are camshaft, 1 of them is crankshaft. I also have a oil pressure transducer and an oil pressure gauge that I will be installing. And this is basically a little bit beyond my limitations as a mechanic. I've done some pretty extensive work to this vehicle already. I changed the rack and pinion, and I gotta say I'm a little intimidated with what's about to happen. So this is basically gonna be a video of triumph and failure, victory and defeat. So hopefully I have the tools I need. Unfortunately, this is one of the most important tools of the job, and it is not big enough. It might work on my camshaft, but it's not big enough for my harmonic balancer, so I'm going to have to pull a rabbit out of my hat on that one. I believe what I'm going to do is pull the whole front end of this car off, so I have access to the front without a lot of problems. This is going to be one for the record books for me, guys, because this is just beyond me as far as stuff I do. But the dealership first quoted me 8 hours. A lot of people online say this takes 8 hours. I get to the dealership, they changed it to 16 hours on me. So they lowballed me. I ain't having it. One thing I want to remind you, if you are going to do this yourself, there's some very important details that you must adhere to. First of all, we need to find the fuel pump fuse, and we need to remove that fuse, and we need to start the car and run all the gas out of the engine, because if we don't, when we get this thing all put back together, we have to crank the engine over to prime the timing chain tensioners with oil. If you don't do this, you will chip teeth off of your timing chain and will possibly jump a tooth and blow your engine up. This is not a joke. This is a very serious job. So let's hope this works. Well, here we are, fellas. It's about 12:25 a.m. I started this job at 9 o'clock at night. I've got the tire front end of the car torn off, the radiator laying over there on the floor, the headlights, and the whole front section. So this is where we're at. And lo and behold, when I dropped the oil pan, look what I found. The infamous timing chain galley gasket fragment in the bottom of my oil pan. So this right here is a $3,500 flaw in this engine. This little piece of paper could have cost me $3,500. I'm hoping to do this myself. We're going to change this gasket, and you guys are going to see me fly or die. I'm either going to pull this off, or I'm going to be one mad screwed individual. This car is my livelihood. I make my money with this car, basically. This gets me to work. This is not just a hot rod. So what I have to do now is pray to God that I can get this pulley off of here. I have a bad feeling that the amount of torque required is going to be beyond the 260 foot-pounds available to me, which is what this torque wrench has. This is where we're at. This is going to be a nightmare, but at least we're getting somewhere. Soon we will have this case taken off, and then we get to the hard part, if you can believe that. This part would be deemed the easy part, and by no means was it easy tearing the front of this car off. But in my opinion, this method is far more effective than dropping the engine, which is what the fools at Nissan were telling me they were going to do. They told me they were going to drop my engine. I don't know about you, but it seemed like a really dumb idea. I mean, look at this thing. How are they going to drop an engine without taking my whole suspension apart, taking my rack and pinion out? I think that my mechanic was just an idiot. He's not my mechanic. But I am so glad that I found this piece of gasket. This is like the sun rising on a cold day right here, guys. That means that I know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm not an idiot. I knew what was wrong with this car. A little bit of hard work and research, and we're getting somewhere. Okay, brothers. I just want to say that indeed Jesus saves. He does indeed. Now, I live in an area where it gets very cold, and we get a lot of salt on the roads, and essentially what happens is these harmonic balancer bolts freeze on like the winters of Antarctica. And I don't have a torch, so I had to take some drastic measures here, and it freaking worked, and I'm so amazed. I had to run an arc bead with an arc welder all the way around this washer to break it free. Now, a lot of people may advise against this, but I advise against not fixing your engine. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. You got to take drastic measures. Just trying to cool down everything here. But son of a bitch, excuse my French, I have been working on this for hours and hours, like 3 hours. I've been trying to get this thing off. I've tried everything. I had a 50-foot breaker bar setup going. I was bending wrenches. My God. Thank you, Jesus. The arc welder broke the bolt free. I am impressed. I am so glad I got this loose. I'm like freaking out. But on another note, I did discover a broken engine bracket while I was in here. I believe that is a result of a sickness that they call lead foot, but I'm not sure. I actually have uranium foot, which is a little bit worse than lead foot. So I'm going to do something to that. I don't know what yet. I'm thinking about maybe just drilling a hole in that bracket and taking some wire and twisting that shit on there. Man, I cuss too much. I'm not replacing that right now. That's just out of the question. I find a blown oil galley gasket. I don't know if you can see that little piece of paper right there sticking out. That is the death of my engine right there. That little piece of paper sliding out from behind that piece of metal. I'm on my way to making that 3,500 bucks, fellas. I'm gonna put the money on the table. Okay, so at last, we are in. You can see a section of the gasket that's blown out right there. This little piece of paper. And as I said, I found some of it in the oil pan. Right there, you see that? That's where all my oil pressure was going. And these little devices here, the VVHC or whatever they're called, variable valve timing units, these things rely on that oil pressure. I believe that these things are connected, these plates are connected to that. And they control that portion of the engine. So when they get down to low pressure, that's where your problems come from. Now what I'm going to have to do is get this bad boy timed up. I've heard you may have to turn this engine as much as 41 turns to get the timing marks to time out, and I think that's advisable. I think that's probably what I'm going to want to do, is just sit here and crank this engine until I make that happen. Because if I were to accidentally chip a tooth, I don't know that indexing this would be a good enough means of handling the problem. Indexing just means to put a mark somewhere to indicate where you started at. I don't know if I like that idea so much. I'm inclined to believe that if I get this thing set on the timing marks, the engine won't want to move out of that position. Because what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to remove this tensioner. And when I do that, the spring-loaded action of these valves here is going to want to make them rotate a tooth or two, maybe. I have to remove the tensioner as well. One thing to note, when you take this off, you have to make sure that you torque this very carefully, because it's very susceptible to over-tightening and it will not function properly. One guy said it's 6 pounds, 6 foot-pounds. I don't know if I believe him. I've seen an actual technician put like 80 foot-pounds on it. That seems a little excessive. So I don't know what to believe. I'm going to have to double check into that. These tensioners look pretty good. I don't know how much more cylinder I have there. Now, this timing chain looks fine to me. I could be wrong. Other than the fact that it looks way, way too small in my opinion. I would have never opted for a timing chain this small if I was the designer of this engine. But then again, I'm not Japanese. So, thank God I got this thing open, because I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to pull this off. So here it is, fellas. This whole bottom section of my gasket had blown out. That's what's caused some driving like an idiot, I would presume. Plus, Japanese rice paper doesn't make a very good gasket. We are into the heart of the beast here. That's where that piece went. I had to loosen all this stuff up to get that off. I hope to God I get this thing back together the way it's supposed to go. I am very nervous right now. I just wanted to share with you guys a quick little idea that I came up with on this particular job process. Not only did I index these cam rotors, but I also locked the chain in place with some stainless steel tie wire. I just loosened this one up and decided, well, maybe I better show them what I've done here. And this stops your chain from jumping. I also had one on here as well, because this is extremely important, because this is what they call an interference engine. And that basically means that it's designed in such a way that if it isn't timed properly, the piston heads will crash right into a valve and the engine can destroy itself. So timing is not only critical for performance on this particular engine, it's absolutely essential to keep you from destroying your engine. So just a little food for thought. And one thing I want to add is I did not add any type of gasket compound to these gaskets. I don't know if maybe I should have or not. I was kind of worried to. This area reaches up to 150 psi's, and I was worried that doing so could cause a blowout. Now, some of you may be cringing right now, wondering, well, what the hell I'm thinking not putting a gasket compound on these. These were steel-lined gaskets. Very well-made gaskets, in my opinion. They have a steel core now. You can see the shiny metal inside of it. And I believe they're called out of syntherine, or made out of syntherine or something like that. It's a new harder composite. So I basically got this all back together, and what I need to do now is go and double check the torque specifications on this tensioner cylinder, because they say you can accidentally collapse the walls just enough to alter this thing's functionality. So I'm a little worried about that. Hopefully, I didn't do anything special to this. Hopefully you don't have to relock this thing or something weird like that, because I don't know. I'm going to go read up on that right now and take a break. I've been out here for quite a while. It's about 3 o'clock right now. And I started this about 9 o'clock this morning, maybe a little earlier than that. Some of that time included driving and going and buying that monster right there. Which, by the way, had I not owned that or purchased that, I probably would not have got this harmonic balancer off. My next step is to clean all the old RCTV or RTV gasket material off of this, and then go from there. This mount should have been made out of steel, and yet they chose to make it out of cast aluminum, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Typical Chinese manufacturing process there. So they wanted to save a few bucks at my expense. Okay, so here we are. I have finally got the case back on. I'm currently working on this engine bracket. What I've done is jacked the engine up and stuck a steel plate under there, under that broken position, and drilled a hole in the plate and then cut some lines to the hole to give me a notch. I jacked the engine up, slid that plate under there, and then now what I'm going to do is cut a piece of metal with 2 holes in it and a notch right here for this section, so that metal will slide back in there. I am so sick of overseas crap. It's just getting really aggravating that we buy all of our stuff from overseas because our manufacturers want to make things cheap cost-wise, but yet they're not just cheap money-wise, they're cheap altogether. It's cheap junk. This stuff is just straight shit. I'm so fed up with foreign products coming from China, Japan, and Taiwan. I just don't understand why they make stuff so crappy. Like, how hard is it to make a bracket out of steel? I mean, is it really cheaper than melting this aluminum, cast aluminum? Steel don't cost as much as aluminum, I didn't think. Why the hell you would make a bracket out of cast aluminum? It just baffles me, and I'm not even an engineer, and I can tell you that's a dumb idea. You can hit that with a hammer and break it. I mean, I just don't get it. They could have made it out of this steel right here, and I'd still be in business. I also notice it looks like I got a little bit of a head gasket leak back there. Man, this car is junk. Never, ever buy an Infiniti. They are so fired. I will never buy an Infiniti again in my life. I mean, the car is badass. It's got power, it looks good, but that's as far as it goes. So if you plan on buying one of these cars, go on ahead and go out and buy about $3,000 worth of tools while you're at it, unless you want to shell out money every week on repairs yourself. Definitely not the prettiest weld in the world, but in a tight space and in a big ass hurry, that'll do for me. I hope it doesn't crack on me. I think it's blobbed on there good enough. I'm not a welder, by the way. You can tell by the splatter I had this thing on 1,000 amps or something there. I wanted to make sure I had a good hot weld. I angled that plate a little bit to give it a secondary triangular action to it. That bottom plate there is bolted down. You just can't see the bolt now. Luckily, I bolted it down first. I almost welded that plate right in my way like an idiot. And I lucked out that it doesn't get in the way of the alternator as far as I know. So I'm going to paint this baby up so it'll last a little longer than a year. See where we go from there. Yeah, I think that ought to hold fairly decent. They'd probably charge $300 to replace that thing. When the other one breaks, I'll probably do the same damn thing to that side. I'll let you know how this works out. Definitely a lot easier than actually changing the mount, because from what I can tell, you got to remove the damn headers. Okay, fellas, I got this thing put back together finally. It's running, sounding pretty good. My pressure is a little high for me. It's not all the way hot yet though, the engine itself. I need to get it up to 176 degrees. But at least I have idle pressure now. 2,000 RPM. Okay, so here we are. I'm taking the car out for a test drive. The oil pressure indicated about 23 to 25 psi's after being warmed up at idle, and I think about 50 psi's at 2,000 RPMs. It is 4 o'clock on Sunday. I started this repair at Friday night at about 9 o'clock at night. And every waking second has been devoted to this repair job. So it's a very extensive job, but I may have just made myself about $4,000 because the engine bracket was broke and all the other stuff. So I'm going to take this thing, get a car wash, see how it drives on the way. Okay, fellas, so here I am. It's about 30 hours later. Started at 9 o'clock on a Friday night and presumed that I was done anyway at about 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon. And I worked all day Saturday. I worked till 2 o'clock in the morning Friday night, and from 8:30 in the morning Saturday till about 1:30 Saturday night. 1:30 a.m. I quit working because my back started hurting. So I got back up probably, I want to say I got up about 11 Sunday and worked till 4 o'clock and took the car out for a test drive, and it ran flawless, man. I mean, no more vibrations. She had all the power in the world. Things were going great, and then suddenly, bam. I take off from a stoplight and my transmission shock shifted into second gear and the check engine light immediately came on. So terrified, I pulled into the nearest AutoZone and had them check the codes, and the codes that came up were P1775, I believe it was, and P0021. These codes came up and said that I had transmission problems now. So I couldn't believe it, man. I'm like, how do I go from a timing chain galley gasket to now I got transmission problems? So I'm thinking in my head, there has to be a ground wire or a connection somewhere that didn't get connected right. After I got the car back in the garage where there was some good lighting, I found two little ground wires in the front of my engine that connect directly by the coolant exhaust line, or the coolant discharge line. The screws had been tightened, finger tight, with about that much exposure left, like they were just started and I'd never finished them. So I had two dangling ground wires, and I'm thinking, oh, please God, let this be the problem. So I tightened those screws, and lo and behold, the car fires right up. The codes are gone. The car is running flawlessly to this point. I've only driven it for about a day. I'm still so gun shy that I feel like it's gonna break down on me again. So I'm driving around like an old woman out there. But so far, fellas, the job is taken. I've not seen any major oil leaks. There's like a small drip, like a drip every 20 seconds. I get one little drop of oil, but I don't know if that's just from me not using the proper gasket on the drain plug. I didn't buy a new copper gasket for my drain plug, but I think it may have paid off, guys. This stack of money is now mine again. I don't have to give it away to the dealership, and they wanted every dime of this. They probably would have charged me more because of that broken engine mount. So the lesson of this video is check your damn ground wires before you try to drive the car, because I almost destroyed my transmission. And also, you can make a huge stack of cash if you just have the brass balls it takes to tear your entire engine apart. Because I tell you what, the whole thing was terrifying. So, there it is. That's the story. There is the car, which is no longer in 1,000 pieces. Thank God. And I'm going to go fire it up and show you that the codes are gone, that the baby is running. I am not broke. And I have a car again, which means I have a job. So this is absolutely one of the best days of my life. And I strongly recommend that some of you not be so afraid to work on your own car. I mean, I'm not a mechanic, but I did do the research it took to do this job. I have a stack of paper about that thick of stuff that I kind of skimmed through and gained some knowledge on. And the 2 pointers that I can give you that are most important is your timing chain tensioner is 6 foot-pounds of torque and like 80 inch-pounds or something like that. If you don't follow that, you're going to have some problems. And, man, just label all your parts, put all your nuts and bolts in little baggies and write down what they came from. Write all over the engine, all over the car. And good luck, man. And I strongly, strongly suggest that you never, ever buy an Infiniti product. I mean, the cars are great, but they're junk. They're absolute junk. That car is a piece of junk. Do not buy that car. I just wanted a fast car because I'm a freaking gearhead who has a lead foot. I don't like not being able to pass on the highway. Don't you hate it when some jerk sees that you're trying to pass him and he speeds up and closes your window of opportunity? I don't have that problem anymore. This thing drives like a rocket and passes like a motorcycle. So there we are. I did it, fellas. The stack of cash is mine. I'm out of here. Good luck, boys. Well, here we are, fellas. I am driving down the road in a fixed vehicle. No check engine lights. None of that jazz. No codes. No oil pressure lights. No knocking and stalling, none of that. I don't know how I got this lucky. I was scared half to death there when the transmission started going out on me, but remember, check all your ground wires. They nearly charged me $4,000 for a new transmission because I didn't check a couple of ground wires. And the dirty crooks probably would have just tightened those wires and then told me I got a new transmission or a rebuilt transmission. So you really got to watch it, fellas. Never trust a dealership. Never trust a mechanic unless you know this person. Because I'm telling you what, guys, this happens every day. Something as simple as a ground wire can be loose, and they'll change the entire throttle body on your car and then tighten up the ground wire just so they can legally charge you that money. Auto shops and dealerships, they have these classes they take where they teach people how to rip off consumers. I know a guy who owns a Midas, and he goes to this seminar every year in Las Vegas, and one year they taught them to show people that their rear wheel bearings are leaking, and it's like a $400 job, and that whether they're leaking or not, tell them they need change, and showing how this Midas here and this Midas there is doing this, and how they're making $80,000 more a year because they're telling people about this bearing and this and that. They're all crooks by design. They are horrible people. Do your own work if you can. The only thing I would consider something you couldn't do is something that involves dropping the engine. And even then, man, even then, I strongly advise you do your best to do all your own work. I'm a carpenter. I am not a mechanic by trade. So if a carpenter can do what I just did, then a lot of you guys can. I mean, you need a lot of tools, but hey, you're a man. You should be investing your money in tools anyway. That's part about that's one of the things that goes along with having a penis, basically. There's certain things that men should do.